The fluorescent lights of Chicago's Roosevelt Station buzzed overhead as I counted the bills in my wallet for the third time. $23. That's what remained of my last paycheck after rent, after groceries, after the minimum payment on the credit card I'd maxed out paying for my mother's funeral 6 months ago. $23 to last me until Friday, and it was only Monday night. I shoved the wallet back into my purse and adjusted my scrubs, the navy blue ones that hid stains better than the lighter colors. My shift at Mercy Presbyterian had run long again. What was supposed to be 8 hours had stretched into 12 when 2 nurses called in sick, and a multi-vehicle accident flooded the ER with trauma cases. My feet ached in a way that suggested my shoes had maybe 1 more month in them before the soles gave out completely. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The L train rumbled into the station, and I pushed through the doors with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd made this commute 5 nights a week for the past 3 years. The car was mostly empty at this hour, just past 11, occupied only by a sleeping homeless man, 2 college kids absorbed in their phones, and a woman in a business suit who looked as exhausted as I felt. I collapsed onto the hard plastic seat and let my head fall back against the window. 31 years old, and this was my life. Living in a studio apartment in Pilsen that smelled like mildew, and my downstairs neighbor's constant cooking, working doubles at a hospital that was perpetually understaffed and underfunded, drowning in debt that grew faster than I could pay it down. It hadn't always been like this. 5 years ago, I'd been Sarah Mitchell, engaged to a financial analyst named Marcus, living in a Lincoln Park condo with granite countertops and a view of the park. We'd had plans a wedding at the Botanic Gardens, a honeymoon in Italy, maybe kids in a few years once we'd both gotten promotions. Then Marcus's investment firm collapsed. Federal investigation, fraud charges, assets frozen. He'd sworn he didn't know what his partners were doing, and maybe he hadn't, but it didn't matter. His legal defense drained our savings. The condo went into foreclosure. And 6 months into the nightmare, I came home from a double shift to find him gone, just a note on the kitchen counter saying he couldn't do it anymore, couldn't watch me sacrifice everything for his mistakes. I hadn't heard from him in 4 years. My mother's cancer diagnosis came 8 months later, just as I was starting to stabilize. Stage 4 pancreatic. 6 months of treatments that insurance barely covered. 6 months of watching the strongest woman I'd ever known waste away to nothing. She died on a Tuesday morning while I was at work, saving someone else's mother. The train lurched to a stop at Western Avenue, my stop. I gathered my purse and headed for the exit, mentally calculating whether I could stretch $23 across 4 days if I ate only ramen and whatever leftovers the hospital cafeteria was throwing out. The shortcut through the alley behind the old warehouse district saved me 10 minutes. I'd been taking it for 2 years without incident. Chicago wasn't as dangerous as people claimed if you were smart, stayed aware, didn't flash money or jewelry you didn't have anyway. But tonight, something felt different. The streetlight at the alley's entrance was out, not unusual. The city never fixed anything in this neighborhood. But there was also a smell, metallic and wrong, that made my nursing instincts prickle with recognition. Blood. Fresh blood. I should have kept walking. Should have taken the long way around on well-lit streets. That's what any sane person would do at 11:30 at night in a Chicago alley that smelled like a crime scene. Instead, I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and moved deeper into the darkness. Hello? My voice echoed off brick walls covered in graffiti. Is someone hurt? A sound, half groan, half gasp, came from behind a dumpster about 20 feet ahead. I quickened my pace, my exhaustion forgotten as adrenaline kicked in. What I found made my breath catch. A man lay slumped against the brick wall, one hand pressed against his side where blood seeped between his fingers. His clothes, an expensive-looking charcoal suit now ruined by dirt and blood, suggested he didn't belong in this neighborhood any more than I would belong at a country club. His face was turned away, but I could see he was conscious, breathing in short, shallow gasps. Oh my God. I dropped to my knees beside him, my nursing training overriding every instinct that screamed to run. Sir, can you hear me? I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you. His head turned toward me, and even in the dim light from my phone, I could see his eyes. Dark, almost black, with a clarity that suggested he wasn't in shock yet, which was good. He was still lucid enough to tell me what happened. Need to. His voice was rough, accented with something I couldn't quite place. Italian maybe, or Greek. Get away. They'll come back. Who will come back? I was already assessing the wound, peeling his blood-soaked hand away to see the damage. Stab wound, Definitely. Deep, in the lower left abdomen, possibly nicked the intestine, but if he was still conscious and talking, maybe he'd gotten lucky and it had missed anything vital. Doesn't matter. He tried to sit up straighter and gasped in pain. You should go. Not safe. I'm not leaving you bleeding in an alley. I pulled off my cardigan, the cheap one from Target, nothing special, and pressed it against the wound. Hold this here. Firm pressure. I'm calling 911. His other hand shot out, surprisingly strong, catching my wrist before I could. Dial. No police. No ambulance. You've been stabbed. You need a hospital. Can't. His eyes held mine, and there was something in that gaze, not just pain, but a kind of desperate authority. You call them, I'm dead. If not from this, he gestured weakly at the wound, then from what comes after. I'd worked in Chicago ERs long enough to understand what he wasn't saying. Gang violence, organized crime, situations where police involvement made things worse instead of better. We saw it constantly: patients who refused to give statements, who checked themselves out against medical advice, who disappeared the moment officers started asking questions. Fine. I made a decision that probably violated a dozen protocols. But you still need treatment. This wound needs to be cleaned, possibly sutured, definitely needs antibiotics, or you'll be dead from infection in 2 days. I have. People. Make a call. He fumbled in his jacket pocket with his free hand, came out with a phone that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. The screen was cracked but still functional. You can barely sit up. You want to walk somewhere? I glanced around the alley, finally noticing the details I'd missed in my initial rush to help. Blood spatter on the wall about 6 feet away, arterial spray, which meant someone else had been hurt here, badly. Scuff marks in the grime suggesting a fight. And on the ground near my knee, a knife with blood on the blade. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been a random mugging. The man was trying to dial with shaking fingers, not quite managing it. I watched him struggle for about 10 seconds before my frustration overrode my caution. Give me the phone. Who am I calling? Marco. He handed it over. Speed dial 2. I pressed the button. The call connected after one ring. Dante? A man's voice, sharp with tension. Where the hell are you? This isn't Dante, I said quickly. My name is Sarah. I found him in an alley off Western Avenue, near the old Packard warehouse. He's been stabbed. He needs immediate medical attention but refuses to let me call an ambulance. A pause then. How bad? Stab wound to the lower left abdomen, significant blood loss. He's conscious and lucid for now, but that could change. He needs treatment within the hour. Stay with him. I'm sending people. 10 minutes. The call ended. I handed the phone back to Dante. Apparently, his name was Dante. Your friend is coming. Try to stay still. Not my friend. My brother. He leaned his head back against the brick wall, eyes closed. You should still go, before they get here. And let you bleed out? I'm a nurse. I took an oath. I kept pressure on the wound, feeling the warmth of his blood seeping through my ruined cardigan. What happened here? Business disagreement. The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been an attempt at a smile. Occupational hazard. What kind of occupation involves knife fights in alleys? The complicated kind. We fell into silence. I monitored his breathing, watched his color, checked his pulse. Strong and steady, which was good. He was in better shape than most stabbing victims I'd treated. Younger too, probably mid-30s, with the kind of build that suggested either dedicated gym time or the kind of physical work that kept you lean and strong. Handsome, if I was being honest. Even bleeding and pale, there was something striking about his face. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips pressed thin against pain. Not pretty boy handsome, but compelling. Dangerous, maybe. What's your name? He asked suddenly, eyes opening to fix on me. Your full name. Sarah Mitchell. I didn't see the harm in telling him. I work at Mercy Presbyterian, 6 blocks from here. Sarah. He said it slowly, like he was testing the weight of it. Why did you stop? Most people would have kept walking. I'm a nurse. I hear someone in pain. I help. It's not complicated. Everything is complicated. His breathing was getting shallower. But thank you for stopping, for staying. Headlights swept across the alley entrance, followed by the sound of multiple vehicles pulling up fast. 3 black SUVs, engines still running, doors flying open. Men emerged, 5 of them, all wearing suits, all moving with the coordinated efficiency of trained security. The one in front was older, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that cataloged everything in seconds. Dante. He crossed the distance in quick strides, dropping into a crouch beside us. Cristo, what happened? Ambush. 3 of Salvatore's men, waiting at the warehouse. Dante's voice was weaker now, the adrenaline probably wearing off. Got 2 of them. 3rd one had a knife. Salvatore. The older man's expression went dark. I told you meeting him alone was... He broke off, seeming to remember I was there. His gaze shifted to me, assessing. You're the nurse. Sarah Mitchell. I kept my hands on the wound. He needs a hospital. Real treatment, not whatever improvised. We have a doctor. Private. The man Marco, presumably signaled to the others. Carlo, bring the car closer. Enzo, get the medical bag. Tony, sweep the scene. They moved with military precision. Within seconds, a man appeared with a professional trauma kit that looked like it had been lifted from an ambulance. Marco opened it, pulling out gauze and antiseptic with practiced ease. I've got it from here, he said to me, not unkindly but dismissive. With respect, unless you're a trained medical professional, you don't got it. I didn't move my hands. That wound needs to be properly cleaned and assessed. If the knife penetrated the peritoneum, she knows what she's talking about, Marco. Dante's hand found my wrist again, this time gentle. Let her work. Marco studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Help us get him to the vehicle. You can treat him on the way. They lifted Dante with surprising gentleness, supporting his weight as they moved him to the nearest SUV. Someone had already laid plastic sheeting across the back seat. They'd come prepared for blood. I climbed in beside him, my hands never leaving the wound. Marco slid into the front passenger seat. Drive. You know where. As the vehicle pulled away, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what I'd gotten myself into. These weren't regular people calling for regular help. The private doctor, the coordinated security, the careful way they moved Dante. This was organized crime. Had to be. And I was sitting in their SUV, covered in blood, heading to God knows where. Where are we going? I tried to keep my voice steady. Somewhere safe. Marco glanced back at me. What's your assessment? I focused on the professional question, pushing away my fear. Single stab wound, approximately 4 inches deep based on blood loss and presentation. Likely missed major organs or he'd be in worse shape. Needs imaging, to confirm. But if we can control the bleeding and prevent infection, prognosis is good. Time frame for treatment? He needs to be on a table being sutured within 30 minutes, or we're looking at serious complications. Marco pulled out his phone, spoke rapid Italian. I caught maybe every 3rd word. Dottore, subito, preparare. Dante's eyes had closed again. I checked his pulse still strong. Stay with me, I said quietly. Don't you dare check out now. Still here. His voice was barely a whisper. Stubborn. Ask Marco. Most stubborn man I've ever met, Marco confirmed, something like affection in his tone, since he was 8 years old, causing problems. The drive took maybe 15 minutes, but it felt longer. We left the industrial area, wound through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer, and finally turned into what looked like a private estate. Gates opened automatically, and we drove up a long curved driveway to a house that was less house and more mansion. Where are we? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. My home, Dante murmured. Welcome. The house's interior was exactly what I'd expect from someone wealthy enough to have a private doctor on call. Marble floors, artwork that was probably original, furniture that looked like it cost more than I made in a year, but I barely registered any of it because we were moving fast, through rooms and down a hallway to what looked like a converted study. A medical table had been set up in the center, surrounded by equipment that wouldn't have been out of place in an actual ER. A man in his 60s wearing scrubs stood ready, hands already gloved. On the table, he directed. No introduction, no questions. Nurse, what am I looking at? I ran through the assessment while they transferred Dante onto the table. The doctor, I never did get his name, listened with the focused attention of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. Good work keeping him stable, he said when I finished. You can scrub in if you want to assist. I could use another pair of trained hands. I should have said no. Should have asked to leave, to call a cab with money I didn't have, to get as far away from whatever this situation was as possible. Instead, I found myself at the sink, scrubbing my hands and arms with practiced efficiency while Marco helped Dante out of his ruined suit. For the next 90 minutes, I fell into the familiar rhythm of trauma surgery. The doctor was good, better than good. His technique was flawless, his hands steady despite his age. Together, we cleaned the wound, repaired a nick in the intestinal wall that could have been fatal if left untreated, and sutured everything closed in neat layers. Dante stayed conscious through most of it despite the local anesthetic. Tuff didn't begin to cover it. He watched us work with those dark eyes, occasionally gritting his teeth against pain, but never crying out or asking us to stop. All done, the doctor finally announced, stepping back to admire his work. Clean closure, no complications. You'll be sore for a few weeks, but you'll live. Thanks to you both, Dante said, his gaze finding mine. Especially you, Sarah Mitchell. You saved my life tonight. Just doing my job. I stripped off the bloody gloves, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep fatigue that made my hands shake. Marco appeared with a bottle of water, which I accepted gratefully. Let me arrange a car to take you home. That's okay. I can take the L. I glanced at my phone past 2 a.m. The trains were still running, technically. Absolutely not. Dante's voice was firm despite his prone position. You'll be driven. Marco, make sure she gets home safely. Of course. Marco gestured toward the hallway. This way, Miss Mitchell. I followed, acutely aware that I was still wearing scrubs covered in Dante's blood, that I had no cardigan, because it was currently in an alley trash can, that I probably looked like an extra from a horror movie. In the marble foyer, Marco handed me a thick envelope. For your trouble and your discretion. I opened it automatically, then froze. Cash. A lot of cash. More cash than I'd seen in months, maybe years. I can't accept this. I tried to hand it back even as my brain screamed at me for being stupid. That was rent money, grocery money, money to replace my worn-out shoes and maybe get ahead on my credit card payments. You can and you will. Marco's tone left no room for argument. You saved Dante's life. That's worth more than what's in that envelope, but it's a start. How much is in here? $5,000. My legs went weak. $5,000. More than 2 months' salary. That's too much. I protested weakly. It's not enough. A new voice, and I turned to find Dante standing in the doorway, one hand pressed against his bandaged side, leaning heavily on the doorframe. You shouldn't be up, I said automatically. Needed to thank you properly. He moved slowly into the foyer, and I resisted the urge to rush over and support him. Sarah Mitchell, you stopped in an alley at midnight to help a stranger. You stayed when anyone sensible would have run. You worked beside our doctor without asking questions. That's worth more than money can repay. I really should go. I clutched the envelope, already planning how to stretch $5,000 across my mounting debts. You need to rest. One more thing. Dante reached into his pocket, somehow still functioning despite everything, and withdrew a business card. Plain white, just a phone number embossed in black. If you ever need anything at all, you call this number. I took the card because refusing seemed rude. I'm not going to. You don't know what you might need, he interrupted gently. Life is unpredictable. Keep the card. Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening. We need to get Miss Mitchell home. Now. Something in his tone sent ice down my spine. What's wrong? Nothing that concerns you. But Marco was already moving, ushering me toward the door where a black sedan waited, engine running. The drive back to my apartment was silent. The driver, not Marco, but another suited man who didn't introduce himself, navigated the empty Chicago streets with efficient speed. He pulled up outside my building and waited while I got out. Thank you, I said awkwardly. He nodded once, and the moment I closed the door, he pulled away. I stood on the sidewalk in the pre-dawn darkness, envelope of cash in one hand, mysterious business card in the other, dried blood still on my scrubs. Across the street, I noticed a dark SUV parked under a broken streetlight. Probably nothing. People parked on this street all the time. But as I climbed the stairs to my third-floor studio, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. I didn't know how right I was. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dante's blood on my hands, felt the weight of that envelope sitting on my kitchen counter, heard Marco's urgent tone when he'd insisted on getting me home now. By the time pale gray light filtered through my apartment's single window, I'd scrubbed my scrubs 3 times in the bathroom sink. The blood kept bleeding through, and had counted the money in the envelope twice to confirm it was real. $5,000. 50 crisp $100 bills. I sat cross-legged on my futon, still in my sports bra and sleep shorts, staring at the cash spread across my coffee table. With this money, I could pay off my highest interest credit card, could buy groceries without checking my account balance first, could maybe, possibly, breathe for the first time in 6 months. But I couldn't stop thinking about where it came from. Organized crime. Had to be. The private doctor. The security detail. The way Dante had said, business disagreement like knife fights were just another day at the office. I'd worked in Chicago ERs long enough to recognize the signs: the patients who came in with gunshot wounds and no stories. The families who paid in cash and disappeared before police could ask questions. I should report this. Call the police, tell them about the stabbing, hand over the money as evidence. Instead, I folded the bills carefully, tucked them into an envelope, and hid it in the freezer behind a bag of frozen peas I'd bought 6 months ago and never eaten. Out of sight, at least temporarily, until I figured out what to do. My shift at Mercy Presbyterian started at noon. I had 5 hours to pull myself together, to pretend last night had been a normal trip home from a normal shift, to forget about dark eyes and Italian accents and business cards with mysterious phone numbers. I was brushing my teeth when someone knocked on my door. Not a polite knock. Hard, insistent, the kind that made my stomach clench with anxiety. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in cheap suits that screamed law enforcement. My heart hammered as I opened the door, keeping the chain on. Sarah Mitchell? The older one held up a badge. Detective Frank Morrison, Chicago PD. Yes? We need to ask you some questions about last night. May we come in? Every instinct screamed to refuse, but refusing made you look guilty. I'd learned that from Marcus's legal troubles. Do I need a lawyer? That depends. Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. Have you done something that requires a lawyer? I slid off the chain and stepped back, letting them into my cramped studio. Both men's gazes swept the space, cataloging the futon, the tiny kitchenette, the pile of medical textbooks I couldn't afford to replace with updated editions, judging the clear poverty of it all. Nice place, the younger detective said, and it sounded like an insult. What's this about? I crossed my arms suddenly, self-conscious about my sleep shorts and oversized Northwestern t-shirt. Morrison pulled out a tablet, swiped to a photo. Do you know this man? Dante. The picture was clearly surveillance footage, him walking into what looked like an upscale restaurant. Perfectly healthy, no blood or knife wounds visible. He wore a different suit, this one charcoal with subtle pinstripes, and even in the grainy image, he looked powerful. Dangerous. No, I lied, hoping my face didn't betray me. Should I? His name is Dante Caruso. He's a person of interest in several ongoing investigations. Morrison studied my reaction. We have footage of you entering a vehicle with Mr. Caruso and several of his associates at approximately 11:45 p.m. last night, Western Avenue, near the old Packard warehouse. My mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? The younger detective, I hadn't caught his name, moved closer. Because we have you on 3 different traffic cameras, getting into a black SUV, license plate registered to Caruso Imports. You were in that vehicle for approximately 17 minutes before it entered a private estate in Lincoln Park. They knew. They knew everything. I want a lawyer, I said, voice shaking. Morrison's expression hardened. You're not under arrest, Miss Mitchell. We're just trying to understand your connection to Dante Caruso, a man who runs one of the largest criminal organizations in Chicago. A man suspected of racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Murder. I sank onto my futon, legs suddenly unable to support my weight. I found him, I heard myself say. In an alley. He was injured. I'm a nurse. I helped him. That's all. You helped him and then accepted a ride to his home? I helped him and then his people drove me back here. I didn't know who he was. I just saw someone bleeding. Morrison exchanged glances with his partner. And did Mr. Caruso or any of his associates offer you anything in exchange for your medical assistance? The money. They were asking about the money. No. The lie came easier this time. They just thanked me and brought me home. So, if we searched this apartment right now, we wouldn't find any large sums of cash? Any gifts or payments from the Caruso family? My heart hammered so hard I was sure they could hear it. I don't consent to a search, and I think I should stop talking without a lawyer present. Morrison stood slowly. That's your right. But let me be very clear, Miss Mitchell. Dante Caruso is a dangerous man. He's currently under federal investigation for crimes that could put him away for life. And anyone who associates with him, who helps him, who accepts money from him, who lies to law enforcement about him, becomes part of that investigation. He dropped a card on my coffee table. When you're ready to tell us the truth, call me. Because right now, you're one phone call away from being charged as an accessory. They left without another word. I sat frozen on my futon for several minutes after the door closed, staring at Detective Morrison's card beside my mostly empty coffee cup. Federal investigation. Accessory charges. Murder. What had I walked into? My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every ounce of common sense, I answered. Hello? Miss Mitchell. Marco's voice. Unmistakable. I understand you had visitors this morning. Ice flooded my veins. How did you? We monitor potential threats. 2 detectives visiting you at 7 a.m. qualifies. A pause. What did you tell them? Nothing. I said I found Dante injured and helped him. That's all. My hands were shaking. They know about the ride, about the estate. They have camera footage. Did you mention the money? No. Good. Relief colored his tone. The money stays between us. As far as anyone knows, you provided medical assistance out of the goodness of your heart and were driven home safely. That's the story. Nothing. More. They said federal investigation. They said murder. I stood, pacing my tiny apartment. I can't be involved in this. I could lose my nursing license. I could go to jail. You won't. Marco's voice was steady, certain. Dante wanted me to assure you you're protected. Any legal troubles that arise from last night we'll handle. You can't just handle federal charges. You'd be surprised what we can handle. A pause. Dante also wanted me to tell you something else. There's a complication. My stomach dropped. What kind of complication? The men who attacked him last night? They know someone helped him. They've been asking questions in the neighborhood, showing your picture around. My picture? How do they have my... The warehouse has security cameras. They pulled footage from the alley. Marco's tone stayed calm, but I heard the undercurrent of concern. We've already scrubbed most of the digital trail, but these men are persistent, and they're not the forgiving type. Oh my God. I pressed my free hand against my forehead, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. This can't be happening. It's being handled. But until we're certain the threat is neutralized, Dante wants security on you. Discreet, you won't even notice them. But they'll be there. I don't want security. I want my normal life back. I understand. Unfortunately, that's not an option right now. His voice softened slightly. You saved Dante's life last night, Miss Mitchell. That makes you important to us. And that means we protect you, whether you want it or not. He ended the call before I could argue. I went to work because the alternative was sitting in my apartment spiraling into panic. The hospital felt like safety, like the one place in my life that still made sense. Here, I knew the rules. Here, I had purpose. My shift started normally enough. Check in at the nurse's station, review patient assignments, grab a cup of the terrible coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, but contained enough caffeine to keep me functional. You look like hell, my friend Jen observed, leaning against the counter with her own cup of terrible coffee. She'd been at Mercy Presbyterian longer than anyone 15 years in the ER, which either made her dedicated or crazy. Double shift catch up with you? Something like that. I avoided her gaze, focusing on the patient charts. Who do I have today? Bay 4 is a regular Marcus Thompson, homeless, pneumonia again because he won't stay at the shelter. Bay 7 is a kid with a broken arm. Mom's convinced it's abuse, but Dad swears it was the trampoline. And Bay 12. She paused, something odd in her expression. Bay 12 requested you specifically. My head snapped up. What? Yeah, it was weird. Guy came in an hour ago, GSW to the shoulder, refused to see anyone but you. Gave your name, said you treated him before. Jen's eyes narrowed. You know him? GSW, gunshot wound. I started, but Jen was, already pulling up the chart on her tablet. Tony DeLuca, she read. 38, no insurance, paying cash. Ring any bells? The name meant nothing, but the situation meant everything. One of Dante's people. Had to be. I'll check on him, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Bay 12's curtain was drawn. I knocked once hospital protocol before sliding it back. The man on the gurney was familiar from last night. One of the suited men who'd helped lift Dante into the SUV. His shoulder was bandaged, blood seeping through, and his face was tight with pain. Tony? I moved to his side, automatically assessing the injury. What happened? Complication from last night. Different crew, same problem. His voice was strained. Boss said to come here. Said you'd handle it quiet. I glanced toward the nurse's station, where Jen was watching with obvious curiosity. I need to report GSWs to the police. It's mandatory. Already called it in myself. Hunting accident. Rifle discharged while I was cleaning it. He managed a weak smile. You just need to patch me up and send me on my way. Hunting accident. I didn't bother hiding my skepticism. That's the story. I pulled on gloves, carefully peeling back the temporary bandage someone, probably the same private doctor from last night, had placed. The wound was clean. Bullet had gone straight through, missed the bone. Lucky, if you could call being shot lucky. This needs proper cleaning and antibiotics, I said quietly. Real treatment, not whatever field medicine you've been doing. That's why I'm here. Tony's eyes met mine, and there was something in that gaze, gratitude. Maybe, or respect. Boss said you were good people, said you'd help. I should tell him to go to a different hospital, to find a different nurse who wasn't already drowning in complications from Dante Caruso's world. Instead, I cleaned the wound with methodical efficiency, applied fresh bandages, started an IV with antibiotics. Professional, detached. Just another patient. You'll need to change the dressing twice daily, I said when I finished. Watch for signs of infection, increased redness, heat, pus. If you develop a fever above 101, you need to come back immediately. Understood. He sat up carefully, testing his mobility. Thanks, Sarah. The use of my first name felt too familiar, too intimate, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. After Tony left against medical advice, like I knew he would, I found Jen waiting for me. So, she said carefully, you want to tell me what that was about? Just a patient. A patient who specifically requested you and paid $3,000 cash for treatment that insurance would cover. She crossed her arms. That's not suspicious at all. $3,000. More money than most ER visits cost, even without insurance. It's complicated, I said finally. Everything about you is complicated lately. Jen's expression softened. Look, I'm not judging. God knows we all do what we have to do to survive in this city. Just be careful, okay? Whatever you're mixed up in. I'm not mixed up in anything, but we both knew that was a lie. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of normal ER chaos. Chest pains that turned out to be anxiety attacks, a car accident with minor injuries, a kid who'd stuck a bead up his nose, regular people with regular problems that didn't involve federal investigations or organized crime. I was finishing paperwork when my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. This time, I almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail. Pretended I'd never met Dante Caruso, never saved his life, never accepted $5,000 in blood money. But curiosity, or maybe something more dangerous, made me swipe to answer. Hello? Sarah Mitchell? A woman's voice this time, smooth and professional. My name is Agent Rebecca Walsh, FBI. I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss your involvement with Dante Caruso. Of course, because why would things get easier? I already spoke to the police this morning, I said carefully. Chicago PD has their investigation. We have ours. Papers rustled in the background. I'm not interested in charging you with anything, Miss Mitchell. I'm interested in your cooperation. Cooperation with what? We've been building a RICO case against the Caruso organization for 3 years. Dante Caruso is careful, smart, and very good at insulating himself from direct evidence. But last night, you spent 90 minutes in his home. You saw his people, his operations, possibly heard conversations. A pause. That makes you valuable. I didn't hear anything. I was treating a stab wound, not eavesdropping. Even so, I'd like to meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Starbucks on Madison. Just a conversation. Her tone turned steely. Unless you'd prefer a formal subpoena? Are you threatening me? I'm offering you an opportunity to be on the right side of this. Think about it. She ended the call. I stood in the hospital hallway, phone clutched in my shaking hand, feeling the walls closing in from all directions. The FBI wanted me to testify. The Chicago PD thought I was an accessory. Dante's enemies were looking for me. And somewhere in all of this was a man I'd saved from bleeding to death. A man who'd looked at me with dark eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. My phone buzzed again. I almost threw it across the hallway. But this time, it was a text from the mysterious number Marco had called from earlier. Security detail in place. Gray Honda Civic. License plate BKT 4729. Don't approach them. They're there for your protection. I looked up, through the ER's glass doors to the parking lot beyond. Sure enough, a gray Honda Civic sat 3 spaces from the entrance, 2 figures visible in the front seats. This was my life now. Federal agents, police detectives, and criminals all circling like sharks who'd smelled blood in the water. And I was the blood. I made it home around 8 p.m., exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with my shift. The gray Honda followed at a discreet distance, parking across the street when I pulled into my building's lot. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, slid the chain, and stood in the darkness trying to remember what normal felt like. My phone rang. Not an unknown number this time, the one from Dante's business card. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Sarah, Dante's voice, and something in my chest tightened at the sound. I heard about your day, the detectives, the FBI, Tony coming to the hospital. I'm sorry you're being dragged into this. Are you? The words came out sharper than intended. Because it seems like you knew exactly what would happen when you gave me that money. Silence then. You're right. I should have warned you better. Should have prepared you for the complications. Complications? The FBI wants me to testify against you. The police think I'm an accessory to murder. And apparently, the people who stabbed you are now looking for me. I paced my small kitchen. That's not complications, Dante. That's my life being destroyed. I know. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Which is why I'm calling to offer you a choice. What kind of choice? Meet with me. Tomorrow night. Let me explain everything who I am, what I do, why you're in danger, and how we can protect you. Really protect you. Not just security following you around. A pause. And if after that conversation you want nothing to do with me, I'll make sure you're safe and leave you alone. But you deserve the full truth before you make that decision. I should say no. Should tell him to lose my number, to take his security detail and his blood money and disappear from my life. Instead, I heard myself ask, where? My home. 8 p.m. I'll send a car. No car. I'll drive myself. I wasn't getting into another vehicle without knowing exactly where I was going. Fair enough. He gave me the address Lincoln Park, like the detectives had said. One of those streets where hedge funds, managers, and old money lived behind gates and security systems. Sarah? Yes? Thank you. For last night. For today. For not running when most people would have. Something in his voice made my breath catch. I won't forget it. He ended the call before I could respond. I stood in my dark kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, wondering what kind of person walks knowingly into a lion's den. But I already knew the answer. Someone who'd spent 6 months drowning, who'd saved every penny just to stay afloat, who'd been so focused on surviving that she'd forgotten what living felt like. Someone who'd found $5,000 in her freezer and a business card that promised complications she'd never imagined. Someone who maybe, possibly, wanted those complications more than she wanted safety. I pulled the envelope from the freezer, counted the money, one more time, and made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow night, I'd walk into Dante Caruso's home with my eyes open. I'd hear his truth, see his world, and decide for myself which side of the line I wanted to stand on. The FBI could wait. The police could wait. Right now, I needed answers that only one person could give me. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. I called in sick to work the first time I'd done that in 3 years, and spent the morning trying to distract myself with cleaning my apartment, organizing my medical textbooks, anything to keep my mind off the evening ahead. At noon, I considered not going, considered packing a bag and disappearing maybe to Wisconsin, where I had a cousin I hadn't seen in years, or Colorado, where nursing licenses transferred easily. But running meant leaving behind everything I'd built, however fragile it was. My job, my apartment, the life I'd scraped together from the ruins of Marcus's betrayal and my mother's death. And if I was being honest with myself, running also meant never knowing what Dante Caruso wanted to tell me. Never understanding why a man involved in murder and racketeering had looked at me like I was something precious. At 7 p.m., I stood in front of my closet trying to figure out what one wore to a meeting with a crime boss. Everything I owned was either hospital scrubs or worn jeans and t-shirts. Finally, I settled on dark jeans and a black sweater. Nothing special, but clean and presentable. The drive to Lincoln Park took 30 minutes in evening traffic. Dante's address led me to a street I'd never have entered otherwise, where properties were measured in acres, not square feet, where gates had intercoms and security cameras. His gate stood open, like he was expecting me. I pulled through, my ancient Honda Accord looking absurdly out of place on the pristine driveway beside luxury vehicles that cost more than I made in 5 years. The house itself was beautiful in an understated way. Modern architecture with warm lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering glimpses of tasteful interior design. Before I could even turn off my engine, Marco appeared at my door. "Miss Mitchell." He opened it for me, ever polite. "Dante is expecting you. This way, please." I followed him through the front entrance, trying not to gape at the soaring ceilings, the original artwork, the kind of wealth I'd only seen in magazines. Everything was elegant but not ostentatious, the home of someone who had money but didn't need to prove it. Marco led me through several rooms to a study lined with bookshelves. A fire crackled in the fireplace despite the mild evening, casting dancing shadows across leather furniture and a massive desk. And there, standing by the window looking out over manicured gardens, was Dante. He'd changed since last night. No longer pale and bleeding, though I noticed the careful way he held himself protecting his injured side. He wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, casual but expensive, and when he turned at my entrance, those dark eyes held the same intensity I remembered. "Sarah." He crossed the room slowly, and I saw him wince slightly. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Neither was I. I stayed near the door, maintaining distance, until about an hour ago. A slight smile touched his lips. "What changed your mind?" "Curiosity. And the fact that the FBI wants to meet tomorrow, so I figured I should hear your side first." His expression darkened. "Agent Walsh? You know her? We've had dealings. She's persistent. I'll give her that." He gestured toward the leather chairs near the fireplace. "Please, sit. Can I offer you something to drink? Wine? Water? Coffee?" "Water is fine." I sat stiffly, hyper-aware of Marco's presence by the door. Dante poured 2 glasses from a crystal pitcher, handed me one, then lowered himself carefully into the opposite chair. "How's your day been, aside from the FBI contact?" "Terrifying, mostly. Your man Tony came to the hospital. The detectives showed up at my apartment, and I've been followed by a gray Honda Civic all day." I took a sip of water. "So, normal Wednesday." "I'm sorry. Truly." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "You weren't supposed to be dragged into any of this. You were just someone kind enough to help a stranger. Except you're not just a stranger, are you?" I set down the glass. "You're Dante Caruso. The detective said you run one of the largest criminal organizations in Chicago, that you're under federal investigation for murder." "All true. No denial, no justification. I am who they say I am." The admission hung in the air between us. I'd expected excuses, explanations, the kind of rationalization that Marcus used to give about his company's creative accounting. Instead, Dante was giving me brutal honesty. "Tell me," I said quietly. "Tell me who you really are." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "My grandfather came to Chicago from Sicily in 1946. He had nothing, couldn't speak English, had no education, no prospects. The only people who'd hire him were other Italians running restaurants and shops in Little Italy." Dante's gaze went distant, lost in memory. He worked hard, saved every penny, and eventually bought a small restaurant, then another. By the time my father was born, my grandfather owned 6 restaurants and had connections throughout the city. "Legitimate businesses?" I asked. "Mostly. But Chicago in the 50s and 60s wasn't kind to legitimate Italian businessmen. The Irish controlled the unions, the Polish controlled the docks, and if you wanted to operate without constant harassment, you needed protection." His jaw tightened. My grandfather found that protection through the outfit, started paying tribute, doing favors, becoming more involved in that world. The outfit? Chicago's traditional organized crime structure. By the time I was born, my father had fully integrated our family into that system. The restaurants were fronts for money laundering. Our trucking company transported more than produce, and our consulting business handled everything from protection to enforcement. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile the elegant man before me with the criminal enterprise he described. And you? Did you choose this life? Yes and no. Dante stood carefully, moving to the fireplace. I had options. I was smart enough for college, could have gone into law or business legitimately. But when I was 17, my father was killed. Rival family, territorial dispute, the kind of thing that happens in this world. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made his choices, knew the risks. But something in Dante's voice suggested the loss still hurt. After his death, I had a decision to make. Let our family's organization collapse, or step up and take control. I was barely legal, still in high school. But, Marco, he glanced toward the door where Marco still stood. He believed I could do it. So I did. At 17? At 17. A ghost of a smile. I was angry, grieving, and probably too young to understand the full weight of what I was taking on. But I learned fast. Made alliances, consolidated power, eliminated threats. Eliminated. The word sent a chill through me. You mean killed? Yes. Again, no hesitation. I've killed people, Sarah. Ordered others killed. Protected our territory and our people through violence when necessary. His eyes met mine. I'm not going to lie to you or soften it. This is who I am. I should have been horrified. Should have stood up and walked out. Called the FBI on my way home. Agreed to testify against him. Instead, I found myself asking, why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth. And because... He moved back toward his chair, sitting with visible discomfort. Because something happened when you found me in that alley. You didn't see Dante Caruso, crime boss under federal investigation. You saw a human being in pain, and you helped. No judgment, no hesitation, just compassion. His hand reached across the small space between our chairs, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I felt the warmth. No one has looked at me like that in a very long time. Like I'm worth saving. My breath caught. There was something raw in his expression, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with everything he'd just told me. You are worth saving, I said quietly. Everyone is. Even criminals? Even criminals. I met his gaze. But that doesn't mean I'm okay with murder and racketeering. I know. And I'm not asking you to be. Dante's fingers finally touched mine, the contact sending an electric current up my arm. I'm asking you to understand that the world I operate in doesn't have simple answers. Sometimes violence is the only language people understand. Sometimes breaking the law is the only way to protect the people who depend on you. That sounds like justification. Maybe it is. He didn't pull his hand away. But it's also the truth. I employ 300 people, Sarah. Legitimate jobs at our restaurants and businesses. I support families, pay for kids' education, make sure people have health care. And yes, some of that money comes from illegal activities. But those families don't care where the money comes from. They care that they can feed their children. I wanted to argue, to point out that the ends didn't justify the means, that there were legal ways to help people. But I'd spent years watching the system fail, watching Marcus lose everything despite maybe being innocent, watching my mother die because insurance wouldn't cover experimental treatments, watching patients in the ER suffer because they couldn't afford care. Maybe the world wasn't as black and white as I wanted it to be. Why am I here, Dante? I asked finally. Not philosophically, practically. Why did you want me to come tonight? He stood, moving to his desk. Because I need you to understand the situation you're in, and I need you to make an informed decision about what happens next. From a drawer, he withdrew a folder, brought it back and handed it to me. Inside were photos, surveillance images of me leaving my apartment, walking to the L, entering the hospital, at least a dozen different shots from the past 48 hours. Who took these? My hands shook as I flipped through them. Salvatore Rossi's people, the men who ambushed me 2 nights ago. Dante's expression was grim. They've identified you as the person who helped me. And Salvatore is the kind of man who believes in leverage. Leverage meaning they'll try to use you against me. Kidnapping, threats, possibly worse. He took the folder back gently. I can't let that happen. So what? I just become your responsibility? Live under your protection indefinitely? I stood, needing distance. I have a life, Dante. A job, an apartment, friends. I can't just disappear into your world. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to let me keep you safe while we resolve the Salvatore situation. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. "It'll take maybe a week, 2 at most. We'll handle Salvatore, make it clear you're off limits, and then you can return to your normal life. And the FBI? The police? I have lawyers for that. Good ones. They'll make sure you're protected legally." His hand came up, almost but not quite touching my face. "Sarah, I know this is asking a lot, but the alternative, letting Salvatore's people find you unprotected, that's not something I can live with. I should refuse, should insist on going to the FBI, accepting their protection in exchange for testimony. But standing this close to Dante, seeing the genuine concern in his dark eyes, feeling the pull of something I couldn't quite name, I found myself nodding. 1 week, I said firmly. "You resolve this Salvatore situation, and then I go back to my life. Deal?" Something that looked like relief crossed his face. "Deal. You'll stay here," Dante said, leading me through the house. "Guest suite on the 2nd floor, private bathroom, sitting area, everything you need. I need to go home first. Get clothes, toiletries, call work, already handled." Marco appeared from the side hallway, carrying an overnight bag I recognized as the one I kept in my car for emergency shifts. "We retrieved essentials from your vehicle and apartment. Clothing will be provided. Your supervisor at Mercy Presbyterian has been informed you're taking emergency family leave." I stopped walking. "You went into my apartment?" "With your landlord's permission," Marco said smoothly. "Building maintenance issue that required immediate access. Everything is secure. The casual invasion of my privacy should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange resignation settling over my shoulders. This was my life now, at least for the next week. Might as well accept it. The guest suite was larger than my entire studio apartment. King-sized bed with hotel-quality linens, a sitting area with leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. The bathroom had a soaking tub, a shower with multiple heads, and more marble than I'd seen outside of museums. "This is where you put guests?" I set my bag on the bed. "We don't have guests often." Dante leaned against the doorframe, careful of his injured side. "This room has been empty for months. What about family? Friends?" "I don't really do friends. And my family." He paused. "My mother lives in Florida. Remarried after my father died. Wanted distance from this life. My sister is in California, married to a software developer. 2 kids. They visit once a year for Christmas, stay for exactly 48 hours, and leave before anyone gets too comfortable." The loneliness in that description made my chest ache. "That sounds awful." "It's safer for them. This world," he gestured vaguely. "It destroys people who aren't built for it. My mother and sister, they're good people. They deserve lives without armed guards and federal investigations. And you don't?" His eyes met mine, something dark and complicated in their depths. I stopped believing I deserved normal things a long time ago. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "I need to handle something. Make yourself comfortable. If you need anything, dial 0 on the room phone. It reaches Marco directly." He was gone before I could ask what needed handling at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday night. I unpacked my meager belongings, the scrubs and worn clothes Marco had retrieved from my apartment, my toothbrush and deodorant, the paperback thriller I'd been reading in stolen moments between shifts. Everything fit in a single drawer of the massive dresser. The sitting area had a bookshelf, and I found myself drawn to Dante's collection. First editions of classics, contemporary literature, philosophy texts with cracked spines, suggesting frequent reading. A man who killed people and read Dostoevsky. The contradictions were giving me whiplash. I was 3 chapters into Crime and Punishment, darkly appropriate when someone knocked. Not Dante. A woman, maybe mid-50s, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried a tray laden with food that smelled incredible. "Miss Mitchell? I'm Rosa, Mr. Caruso's housekeeper." Slight Italian accent, warm smile. "I thought you might be hungry. You missed dinner." She set the tray on the coffee table, pasta in cream sauce, fresh bread, a green salad, and what looked like homemade tiramisu for dessert. "This is too much," I protested, even as my stomach growled. I'd forgotten to eat all day. Mr. Caruso was very specific. "Make sure you eat. Make sure you're comfortable." Rosa studied me with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen a lot in her life. "He doesn't usually bring people here. You must be special." "I'm just someone who helped him when he was hurt." "That's exactly what makes you special." Rosa moved toward the door. In this world, people who help without expecting anything in return are rare. Treasure that quality, Miss Mitchell. Don't let this place take it from you. After she left, I ate mechanically, my mind churning through everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. 2 days ago, I'd been Sarah Mitchell, broke nurse struggling to survive in an expensive city. Now I was living in a crime boss's mansion, under protection from enemies I'd never met, while the FBI built a case that could destroy both of us. How did life change so completely in such a short time? I was finishing the tiramisu, which was possibly the best thing I'd ever tasted when my phone rang. Not unknown this time. Jen from work. I almost didn't answer, but ignoring her would raise more questions than answering. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hey yourself. Susan said you took emergency family leave?" Jen's voice carried concern. "Everything okay? Your mom's already, do you have other family?" "Distant cousin. Medical emergency. I'll be back next week." The lies came easier than they should have. "Okay. Just wanted to make sure you were all right." A pause. "Sarah, that guy yesterday, Tony, he came back this afternoon asking for you. When I said you weren't here, he looked worried, which was weird. My stomach clenched. Did he say what he wanted? Just asked if you were okay, if anyone had been bothering you. I told him I didn't know anything." Another pause. "Sarah, are you in some kind of trouble? Because if you need help, I'm fine. Really. Just dealing with family stuff. You're a terrible liar, you know that?" But Jen's tone was affectionate. "Be careful, whatever you're doing, and call if you need anything." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Tony had gone back to the hospital asking about me, which meant Dante's people were worried enough to check on my well-being even when he hadn't asked them to. These criminals were showing more concern for my safety than Marcus ever had. That thought kept me awake long after I'd changed into the expensive pajamas someone had left, folded on the bed silk, naturally, because apparently even sleepwear was luxury in Dante's world. A scream woke me at 3 a.m. I was on my feet before I was fully conscious, nurses' training kicking in. Someone was hurt, in pain, needed help. The scream came again, muffled but anguished, from somewhere down the hall. I grabbed the robe that matched my silk pajamas and ran barefoot into the corridor. Light spilled from a doorway 3 rooms down Dante's room, I realized as I got closer. "No." His voice, raw with pain and something else. "No, don't please. Nightmare." He was having a nightmare. I pushed through the half-open, a door without thinking. The room was massive, dominated by a bed where Dante thrashed against expensive sheets. His face was contorted, sweat soaking his dark hair, one hand pressed against his bandaged side. "Dante." I approached carefully. "Dante, wake up. You're dreaming. Can't there?" His breathing was rapid, panicked. Blood. So much blood. I sat on the edge of the bed, reaching for his shoulder. "Dante, it's Sarah. You're safe. You're home. Wake up." His eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. For a terrifying second, I saw something feral in his gaze. The killer the FBI said he was. The dangerous man who'd survived his father's murder at 17. Then recognition flooded in, and he grabbed my wrist with desperate strength. "Sarah? I'm here. You're okay. It was just a nightmare." He sat up abruptly, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. His grip on my wrist didn't loosen. "I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" "It's fine. Are you okay? You were..." I hesitated. "It sounded bad. The night my father died." His voice was flat, emotionless in that way that suggested buried trauma. "I dream about it sometimes, usually when I'm injured or stressed." "What happened that night?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Just sat there, hand still circling my wrist, breathing slowly, evening out. Then, I was 17. We were having dinner rare, because my father was always working, but it was my birthday, so he'd come home early. I stayed silent, letting him talk. 4 men came through the front door. I don't know how they got past our security. We found out later someone had been bribed. They shot my father first. 3 times, center mass. He was dead before he hit the floor. Dante's thumb traced absent patterns on my wrist. My mother screamed. I tried to get to my father, but one of them hit me. I remember the taste of blood, the sound of my mother crying, the way our dining room looked with my father's blood spreading across the marble. Dante. They left us alive. My mother and me. That was worse than killing us, leaving us to find him like that. To call the police. To explain to my sister she was only 14 that our father was gone. His eyes finally met mine. I see it sometimes when I sleep. The blood, the way he looked, the helplessness of being 17 and watching your whole world end. Without thinking, I pulled my wrist free and took his hand instead, threading our fingers together. I'm sorry you went through that. It made me who I am, for better or worse. He squeezed my hand. You should go back to bed. I'm fine now. Will you be able to sleep? A humorless smile. Probably not, but I'll try. I should have left. Should have returned to my guest suite, put distance between myself and this damaged, dangerous man. Instead, I heard myself say, "What if I stayed? Just until you fall asleep?" Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or gratitude. You don't have to do that. I know. But I'm offering anyway. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. I moved to the armchair by the window, settling in while Dante lay back down. But after a few minutes of silence, his voice came from the darkness. Sarah? Yes? Would you... He hesitated. Would you mind lying here? I'm not asking for anything inappropriate. It helps. Having someone close. Every rational instinct screamed this was a terrible idea. Getting into bed with a man I barely knew. A criminal under federal investigation. Someone who'd admitted to killing people. But I'd seen his nightmare. Heard the raw pain in his voice when he talked about his father. And something in me, the part that had stopped in that alley, the part that had spent 6 months drowning in grief and loneliness, understood what he was asking for. Not sex, not romance, just human connection. Just someone to anchor him against the darkness. I crossed to the bed, slipping under the covers on the far side. The mattress was enormous. We could lie here without touching at all, except Dante's hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining. Thank you, he whispered. We lay like that, hands clasped, until his breathing evened out and I felt the tension leave his body. He was asleep, finally peaceful. I should have left then. Returned to my room, maintained appropriate boundaries. Instead, I closed my eyes and let exhaustion pull me under, still holding the hand of a man who killed people and read philosophy and had nightmares about watching his father die. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows and the disorienting realization that I'd slept better than I had in months. Also, that I was no longer holding Dante's hand. He was already awake, sitting up against the headboard with a tablet, reading something that made his expression darken. Good morning, I said, suddenly self-conscious about being in his bed wearing silk pajamas. Morning. He set the tablet aside. I didn't want to wake you. You looked peaceful. What time is it? Almost 9. A slight smile. Rosa's been trying to decide if she should bring breakfast up here or wait for you to emerge. I told her you'd probably want coffee the moment you were conscious. As if summoned, Rosa appeared in the doorway with a tray. Good morning, Miss Mitchell. I have coffee, fresh fruit, and cornetti Italian pastries. Mr. Caruso's grandmother's recipe. She set the tray on the bedside table, her expression carefully neutral about finding me in her employer's bed. If she had opinions, she kept them to herself. Thank you, Rosa. Dante's tone was warm. That's perfect. After she left, I poured coffee from the silver carafe, adding cream and sugar while Dante watched. About last night, I started. I'm grateful, and I'm not going to make it weird. He accepted the cup I handed him. You helped when I needed it. That seems to be your specialty. I'm a nurse. It's literally my job. It's more than that. He took a sip, studying me over the rim. Most people in your position finding themselves in a crime boss's home, surrounded by armed guards, sleeping in a stranger's bed would be terrified. But you're not. Why? I considered the question honestly. I think I stopped being scared when my mother died. Not that I'm not afraid of things I am, but after watching someone I love waste away despite everything medicine could do, after watching Marcus abandon me when things got hard, after spending 6 months barely surviving, your world doesn't scare me as much as it probably should. That's either very brave or very broken. Maybe both. I picked up a cornetto, biting into flaky layers of pastry and cream. Oh my God, this is incredible. Rosa's been perfecting that recipe for 40 years. She keeps threatening to retire, but I think she'd miss the kitchen too much. We ate in comfortable silence, and I tried to ignore how domestic this felt. Breakfast in bed, morning, and coffee. the easy companionship of two people who'd somehow become familiar despite knowing each other for less than 72 hours. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Agent Walsh's number. I showed Dante the screen. She wanted to meet yesterday. I was supposed to call back. Don't answer. Not yet. He set down his coffee. I need to tell you something first, about what she's really after. We moved to Dante's study more appropriate than conducting business from his bed where he spread files across the massive desk. Agent Walsh has been building her RICO case for 3 years, he explained. Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. She needs evidence that connects me directly to criminal activities, recorded conversations, financial records, witness testimony. And you think she wants me to provide that testimony? I know she does. He opened one of the files, showing me surveillance photos. The FBI has been watching my organization for years, but I'm careful. I don't discuss business on phones they can tap. I don't put anything incriminating in writing. And the people who work for me are loyal. They won't turn on me for immunity deals. Except me, the outsider who stumbled into your world and might be scared enough to cooperate. Exactly. Dante's expression was grim. Walsh will offer you witness protection, immunity from prosecution, maybe even money. She'll paint me as a monster and herself as your savior. And she'll pressure you to testify about what you saw here, the private doctor, the security, anything that suggests criminal enterprise. But I didn't see anything criminal. I treated a stab wound. That's not illegal. The stab wound itself connects to Salvatore Rossi, who the FBI is also investigating. If you testify about treating me, they'll subpoena you to identify my associates. Marco, Tony, Rosa, everyone becomes part of their case. He closed the file. I can't let that happen. So what do you want me to do? Refuse to cooperate with federal investigators? That's obstruction of justice. I want you to meet with her, hear her offer, and then make an informed decision about whether you believe I'm the monster she says I am, or something more complicated. I moved to the window, looking out over the manicured grounds where armed guards patrolled in pairs. This isn't fair. I helped a stranger in an alley, and now I'm caught between the FBI and organized crime. I know, and I'm sorry. Dante came to stand beside me, close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. The FBI isn't interested in justice. They're interested in statistics, arrests, convictions, headlines that make them look good. Walsh doesn't care that our restaurants employ 300 people, that we support families, that we do more for this neighborhood than the city ever has. You're still breaking the law. Yes, but whose law? The same system that let Marcus's partners destroy your life and face no consequences? The same system that left your mother to die because insurance companies value profits over people? His voice was quiet but intense. I'm not saying I'm a good man, Sarah, but I'm not the monster they need me to be to justify their investigation. Before I could respond, Marco appeared in the doorway. We have a problem. Dante's expression immediately shuddered into something cold and professional. What kind of problem? Salvatore just made contact. He wants a meeting. Tonight, neutral location, to discuss terms. Marco's gaze flicked to me. He specifically mentioned Miss Mitchell. My blood turned cold. What about me? He knows you're here. Under our protection, he's suggesting an exchange. Marco's jaw tightened. Your safety in return for territorial concessions? Absolutely not. Dante's voice was ice. Tell him to go to hell. If we refuse, he'll escalate. You know how he operates. Marco moved into the room, his body, language tense. He's already positioning men around the property, testing our responses. This morning, 2 of his people tried to approach the gates before our security ran them off. I felt my legs go weak. He's coming here? He's probing for weaknesses. Dante turned to me, his expression fierce. But he won't get through. This property has better security than most federal buildings. You're safe here, Sarah. I promise. For how long? A week? A month? Fear was giving way to anger. I can't live like this indefinitely, Dante. I have a life, a job, friends. I can't just disappear into your fortress. I know, which is why I'm going to end this. He turned back to Marco. Set up the meeting. Tonight, I'll hear what Salvatore has to say. That's a mistake, Marco argued. He's looking for an opportunity to. I'm aware of what he's looking for. But if he wants to talk, we talk. Maybe we can resolve this without more bloodshed. Dante's gaze was hard. Set it up. Bring Tony and Enzo. Heavy security, but discreet. I don't want this turning into a war in the middle of the city. After Marco left, Dante turned to me. You'll stay here. Rosa and 3 of my best people will be with you at all times. I should be there. The words surprised me, but once said, I meant them. If this is about me, I should be part of the conversation. Absolutely not. These meetings are dangerous even under the best circumstances. And if Salvatore sees you, what? He'll know I'm real? That I'm not just some abstract leverage you're protecting? I moved closer, meeting his gaze. Dante, I'm tired of being a pawn in someone else's game. If this meeting is happening because of me, I deserve to be part of it. You don't understand what you're asking. These aren't negotiations over coffee. He broke off, frustration clear on his face. People die in meetings like this, Sarah. I won't risk you. You won't risk me, or you won't risk what it would mean if something happened to me? The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us had addressed. The nightmare last night, breakfast this morning, the way he'd looked at me since the moment I'd stopped in that alley. There was something building between us that went beyond doctor-patient, beyond protector-protected. Something dangerous and compelling and completely inappropriate given the circumstances. Both, Dante said finally, his voice rough. I won't risk you for both reasons. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Agent Walsh, persistent. Answer it, Dante said. Hear what she has to say. Then decide. I swiped to accept. Hello? Miss Mitchell. Walsh's voice was professional, controlled. I was expecting your call yesterday. I've been dealing with some complications. I'm aware. You're currently at Dante Caruso's residence in Lincoln Park, under his protection. No question, just statement of fact, which makes this conversation even more important. My eyes met Dante's. How did you know where I am? We've been surveilling the property for months. You arrived last night at 8:47 p.m. Haven't left since. Papers rustled. Miss Mitchell, I need you to listen very carefully. Dante Caruso is a dangerous man. He's involved in activities that have resulted in multiple deaths. And the longer you stay under his influence, the harder it becomes to claim you're an unwilling participant. Let me finish. I'm offering you a deal. Full immunity for anything related to Caruso's organization. Witness protection if needed. And in exchange, you testify about what you've seen, what you know, who you've met. A pause. This is a limited-time offer, Miss Mitchell. If you refuse, if you continue to associate with Caruso, I'll have no choice but to include you in the criminal conspiracy charges. You're threatening me. I'm giving you options. There's a difference. Walsh's tone softened slightly. I've read your file. You're a good person who made bad choices first with your fiancé's legal troubles, now with Caruso. But good people can still go to prison if they obstruct federal investigations. Don't let loyalty to a man you barely know destroy your life. Dante's expression was unreadable, but I saw tension in the set of his shoulders. I need time to think, I said finally. You have 24 hours. After that, I'm getting a warrant for your arrest as a material witness. We'll have this conversation either way, but it'll be much less pleasant from a federal holding cell. Walsh ended the call. I set the phone down carefully, my hands shaking. She's going to arrest me if I don't cooperate. She's bluffing. Material witness warrants require evidence you have information about a crime. She doesn't have that. Are you sure? Because she seemed pretty confident. Walsh is always confident. It's her strategy intimidate people into cooperating before they realize she's on shaky legal ground. But something in Dante's voice suggested he wasn't as certain as he claimed. I moved to the leather chair by the fireplace, suddenly exhausted despite having slept well. I can't believe this is my life. 3 days ago, my biggest problem was making rent. Now I'm choosing between federal prison and becoming part of a criminal conspiracy. There's a third option. Dante sat across from me. We resolved the Salvatore situation tonight, remove the immediate threat. Then I set you up somewhere safe. New city, new identity if necessary. Enough money to start over. You walk away from all of this. And never see you again. And never see me again. He confirmed quietly. You get your life back. Different circumstances, but free. The offer should have been tempting. A chance to escape this nightmare. To start fresh somewhere far from Chicago and federal investigations, and men who solved problems with violence. But all I could think about was Dante's nightmare last night. The vulnerability in his voice. When he'd talked about his father, the way he'd held my hand like I was an anchor keeping him from drowning. "I don't want to run," I said finally. "I'm tired of running from Marcus's betrayal, from my mother's death, from every hard thing that's happened. Maybe it's time I stood my ground. Standing your ground in my world might get you killed. So, might running. At least if I stay, I know what I'm fighting." Something shifted in Dante's expression. Respect maybe, or something deeper. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He stood, crossing to where I sat, and held out his hand. "Then we face this together. All of it, Salvatore, the FBI, whatever comes next." I took his hand, let him pull me to my feet. We stood close enough that I could see the darker ring around his irises, smell the expensive cologne that clung to his skin. "Why did you give me that card?" I asked suddenly. "In the alley, with your phone number. You could have just let me walk away." "Because I saw something in you that reminded me of who I used to be before this life." His free hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek. Someone who still believed helping people mattered. Someone who hadn't been completely broken by the world. "I am broken, just in ways you haven't seen yet. Then we're both broken. Maybe that's enough." He leaned closer, his intention clear. I could have stepped back, should have maintained professional distance, remembered that he was a criminal, and I was potentially a witness, and this was complicated in every possible way. Instead, I closed the distance and kissed him. His response was immediate, one hand sliding into my hair, the other pulling me closer despite his injured side. The kiss was nothing like I expected. Not aggressive or controlling, but almost desperate, like he was trying to hold on to something precious that might slip away. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably the worst I've ever had. We should stop. We should." Neither of us moved. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. Dante disappeared into his study with Marco and several other men, planning for the evening's meeting with Salvatore. I spent the time trying to read, trying to think, trying to ignore the fact that I'd kissed a man who the FBI considered a criminal mastermind. Rosa brought lunch, an elaborate antipasto plate with fresh mozzarella, prosciutto, marinated vegetables. She studied me with knowing eyes while setting it down. "You're worried about tonight," she observed. "Is it that obvious?" "Mr. Caruso is worried too. He doesn't usually worry." She settled into the chair across from me. "I've worked for this family 23 years, Miss Mitchell. Since before Dante's father died. I watched that boy grow up too fast, take on too much responsibility, become harder than anyone should have to be." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in the last 3 days, I've seen something I haven't seen in years. Him laughing at breakfast, him letting someone into his room during a nightmare, him looking at someone like they might understand the parts of himself he keeps hidden." Rosa's gaze was gentle. "You're good for him, whatever this is between you. It's not we barely know each other. Time doesn't matter as much as people think. Sometimes you recognize something in someone immediately, something that fits." She stood, moving toward the door. "Just promise me you'll be careful, both with your heart and your life. This world takes both if you let it." After she left, I picked at the food, my appetite gone. Through the window, I could see men moving across the grounds with increased urgency. More security arriving, weapons being checked. They were preparing for war, and I was sitting in luxury eating imported cheese. At 6 p.m., Dante found me in the library. He'd changed into a dark suit that probably cost more than my car, his hair combed back, face clean-shaven. He looked every inch the powerful businessman except for the cold calculation in his eyes that suggested violence was always an option. "The meeting is at 8, he said without preamble. "Warehouse district, neutral territory. Marco and 4 others are coming with me." "And me? You stay here. Rosa and Tony will remain with you, plus 2 guards outside your door. If anything goes wrong, if you hear anything concerning, Rosa knows the protocols." "What protocols?" "Emergency evacuation. There's a safe room in the basement, reinforced walls, separate communications. If the situation deteriorates, you go there immediately." The casual way he discussed worst-case scenarios made my stomach clench. "Dante, maybe this is a mistake. Maybe you should wait, gather more information." "I've been gathering information for 3 days. Salvatore wants to talk. If there's a chance to resolve this without more violence, I have to take it." He moved, closer, his hand finding mine. "I'll be careful, I promise." "You can't promise that. Not in your world." Then I promise I'll do everything possible to come back to you. His other hand cupped my face. Because I want to explore whatever this is between us. I want time to figure out if you looking at me last night like I was worth saving meant as much as it felt. It meant everything. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. He kissed me then, slower than this morning, like he was memorizing the taste of me. When he pulled back, his eyes held something I couldn't quite name. "Stay safe," he said. "I'll be back before midnight." Then he was gone, and I was left standing in the library watching through the window as he climbed into an SUV surrounded by armed men. The convoy pulled away, taillights disappearing down the long driveway. I pressed my hand against the glass, a prayer I didn't quite believe forming in my mind. "Come back, please, just come back." The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rosa tried to distract me with dinner, another elaborate meal I couldn't eat, and conversation about anything except where Dante was and what might be happening. But my mind kept circling back to all the ways this could go wrong. Salvatore attacking during the meeting. The FBI using the gathering as an opportunity for arrests. Dante's injuries from 3 nights ago reopening in the stress. Or worse, him not coming back at all. At 10 p.m., Tony appeared in the doorway of the library where I'd been pretending to read. "Miss Mitchell." His expression was grim. "We have a situation." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of situation?" "What kind of situation?" The meeting went south, shots fired. Marco called in, "They're en route back now, but Mr. Caruso was hit." The world tilted sideways. "How bad?" "I don't know details, but he's conscious, and they're bringing him here instead of the hospital." Tony's jaw tightened. "He's asking for you." I was already moving, my medical training, overriding the panic. "I need supplies, everything from 3 nights ago, plus more bandages, antibiotics, pain medication, already set up in his room. The doctor is on his way, but he's 40 minutes out. Then I'll start without him." We ran through the house, Tony's hand on my elbow guiding me. In Dante's room, the medical supplies were laid out on a table, like someone had anticipated this exact scenario. Probably because they had in Dante's world, gunshot wounds were occupational hazards. Headlights swept across the windows. The convoy had arrived. I heard commotion downstairs, urgent voices, footsteps pounding up the stairs. Then Marco appeared, supporting Dante on one side, while another guard took the other. Blood soaked Dante's suit jacket, dripping onto the marble floors. His face was pale, jaw clenched against obvious pain, but his eyes found mine immediately. "Sarah," relief colored his voice, "you're safe." "Me? You're the one bleeding." I rushed to help them pulled him to the bed. "What happened?" "Salvatore brought 12 men to a meeting that was supposed to be neutral. It was an ambush." Marco's voice was tight with controlled fury. "We got out, but Dante took a round to the shoulder. Different side from the knife wound, at least." They lowered Dante onto the bed, and I immediately began cutting away his jacket and shirt. The bullet had entered his right shoulder, just below the collarbone. Blood pulsed with each heartbeat, arterial bleeding, which meant we had maybe minutes to control it before he went into shock. "Everyone out except Marco," I ordered, falling into the calm competence of emergency medicine. "I need space to work." The guards left without argument. I pressed gauze against the wound, trying to visualize the anatomy. The bullet had probably missed the subclavian artery. He'd be unconscious or dead already if it hadn't. But it was close, dangerously close. "This needs a hospital," I said, maintaining pressure. "Dante, you need surgery. Real surgery. Not what I can do here." "Can't." His voice was strained. "Hospital means police reports. Questions. They'll connect this to Salvatore, and the whole thing escalates." "You'd rather die than deal with police questions?" "I'd rather," he gasped as I pressed harder, "rather trust you to save my life again. I'm a nurse, not a trauma surgeon." "You're Sarah Mitchell, who pulled me out of an alley and kept me breathing when most people would have run." His hand found mine, blood slick and warm. "I trust you more than any surgeon." Marco handed me fresh gauze. "The doctor will be here in 20 minutes. Can you keep him stable until then?" I assessed the bleeding slowing but not stopped. "Maybe. But he needs blood. His pressure's dropping." "I'm O-negative," Marco said immediately. "Universal donor. Take whatever you need." For the next 20 minutes, I worked with intense focus. Started an IV, hung bags of saline, prepared Marco's blood for transfusion, using equipment that suggested this wasn't the first time Dante's people had needed emergency medical care. The doctor, the same one from 3 nights ago, arrived like a controlled storm, taking in the situation with practiced efficiency. Gunshot wound, right shoulder. I briefed him. Arterial bleeding controlled, blood pressure stabilizing with fluids and transfusion from a matched donor. No exit wound, so the bullet's still in there. Good work. He moved to the table, gloved hands already reaching for instruments. Think you can assist with extraction? I've never done bullet extraction. You're about to learn. Scrub in. For the next 90 minutes, I watched and assisted as the doctor navigated through muscle and tissue to extract the bullet lodged against Dante's clavicle. It was delicate, meticulous work, one wrong move, and we could sever the subclavian artery and lose him in seconds. But the doctor's hands were steady, and somehow, so were mine. When he finally held up the misshapen bullet, triumph flickered across his weathered face. Got it. Close him up, and he'll live to fight another day. Dante had been conscious through most of it despite the local anesthetic, watching us work with those dark eyes that missed nothing. When the doctor finally stepped back, declaring the surgery complete, Dante's gaze found mine. Thank you, he said quietly. Both of you. Thank me when you're not getting shot at meetings, I replied, stripping off bloody gloves. The doctor packed his supplies. Keep him down for at least 3 days. Light activity only for 2 weeks. And for God's sake, try not to collect any more injuries. Even you can't heal infinite wounds. After he left, Marco appeared in the doorway. Status? Stable. Needs rest. I was suddenly aware of how exhausted I was, how much adrenaline had been keeping me functional. What happened at the meeting? Marco's expression darkened. Salvatore never intended to negotiate. He wanted Dante dead or captured, wanted to use Sarah as leverage to force territorial concessions. We got out, but 3 of his men didn't. You killed them. Not a question. They were shooting at us. What did you expect? Marco's tone was matter of fact. This is war now. Salvatore declared it the moment he turned that meeting into an ambush. Marco, Dante said from the bed, his voice weak but commanding. Double security. I want eyes on every access point to this property, and contact our people, let them know we're moving to defend our territory. Already done. But boss, you need to rest. I will. After we discuss next steps. No. My voice cut through their planning. After you sleep. Marco, this can wait until morning. He's been shot, lost significant blood, and just had surgery. He needs rest, not strategy sessions. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression stopped him. 8 hours. Then we regroup. After he left, I turned to find Dante watching me with something, like amusement. You just ordered around my second in command. Someone needs to. You're both workaholics who think sleep is optional. I moved to his bedside, checking his bandages. How's the pain? Manageable. His hand caught mine. Stay with me again? Like last night? Dante, you just had surgery. You need proper rest. I'm not asking for anything except your presence. His thumb traced circles on my palm. Please, I sleep better when you're here. I should have insisted on going to my own room, on maintaining professional boundaries. But looking at him pale from blood loss, bandaged on both sides now, vulnerable in a way he'd never let anyone else see, I couldn't refuse. Fine, but I'm setting alarms to check your vitals every 2 hours. Whatever you need. He shifted carefully, making room. Just stay. I climbed into bed beside him, hyper-aware of his injuries, of how fragile he suddenly seemed despite being one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. His hand found mine in the darkness, and this time, I didn't question it. Just held on and hoped we'd both survive whatever was coming next. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of Dante's Our Home, watching sunrise paint the Chicago skyline gold and crimson. The FBI had dropped their investigation after Salvatore Rossi was arrested on unrelated charges. Agent Walsh never got her testimony, never got her RICO case. Dante's lawyers were very good at their jobs. I'd quit Mercy Presbyterian, started a private clinic instead, treating people in Dante's organization who couldn't risk hospitals. It wasn't the career I'd planned, but it was meaningful in ways I hadn't expected. Morning. Dante's arms circled my waist from behind, careful of the shoulder that was still healing. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. I leaned back against him. I keep thinking about that night in the alley. How different my life would be if I'd just kept walking. Regrets? I turned in his arms, meeting. Those dark eyes that had first held me captive in blood and shadows. Not even one. He kissed me, slow and sure, and I tasted the future we were building, complicated, dangerous, but undeniably ours. I'd saved a stranger's life. Somehow he'd saved mine too.